Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Layer by Layer, the show about 3D printing and our place inside of the industry. Today, we're going to be talking about updates to the Etsy app, COBRA Golf Clubs, as well as a potential bankruptcy on the horizon, and maybe a little bit of info about the filament market in general. But with that, let's first pay the bills. This episode is sponsored by Tangled Filament. Tangled Filament is our attempt to reduce the cost of filament down to $10 per kg. We've been doing that by optimizing production inside of our existing facility. Tangled Filament is purely PLA, and you can have any color you want so long as it's black. It is available over on tangledfilament.com, and we are even getting caught up on shipping so that they go out within 2 to 4 days. Yeah, Tangled update. We released $15 per spool last week, and the demand was more than we thought it was going to be. So we're about 2 days behind of our normal shipping time. But we're getting that caught up. We've been running double time. And in fact, during this last week while we were running, we found a way to get about 12% more out of the machinery that we have. So we got another little optimization in that. But we hit 15. We'll come back to Tangled here, but I want to do other news first. There's other updates with Tangled that we'll be going into, but I don't want to deep dive on that. But yeah, get yourself some $15 per kg filament over there. Free shipping, all the good stuff. Alrighty, COBRA Golf. COBRA Golf has introduced what it believes to be the first set of commercially available 3D printed steel irons. The Limit 3D irons have been developed in partnership with NTOP. These computational design software help to create compact player's blade profile that is said to offer a similar level of forgiveness as an oversized game improvement club with a feel of a forged iron. Despite previously applying HP's metal jet binder jetting technology to produce the golf clubs, the Limit 3D iron club heads have been produced using direct metal laser sintering technology. Traditionally, to design an iron with such forgiveness would have meant sacrificing the look and feel of the iron by making it larger in profile, but COBRA has been aiming to design an iron that has had the shape and feel of a compact blade that desired by better players and the forgiveness of the aspirational player needs. 3D printed golf club head. First time they've kind of come to market. We did not have notes of the actual pricing of these. I'm going to bet they're fairly expensive, though at the same time, DMLS, direct metal laser sintering, is pretty affordable anymore for small parts. And a golf head is getting to the larger edge of small parts, but it is pretty darn effective. I would be interested in how they're doing the finishing on these because they look like a normal golf head. They very clearly are going through a polishing process of some sort, maybe even additional machining. But I also am not totally sure within the context of how they're describing this, how the geometry control of 3D printing actually helps them. But it's great to see another product made by a real company actually come into production. And Topology was the ones who did the lattice work inside of it, so there's some sort of lattice inside of there. So they have to be going for lightweighting of some sort. But anyhow, that's a nifty deal. AM Data Slice from Additive Manufacturing Research is a regular segment. In 2021, the revenue for polymer materials was $1.6 billion, while metal powders generated $500 million, with a compound annual growth rate for polymers from 2021 to 2024 estimated to be about 18.5%. The forecast for 2024 anticipates polymer materials to reach $2.7 billion. In contrast, metal powders are expected to grow at around 30.5% over the same period, achieving a $1.1 billion in revenue in 2024. Polymer, all types of 3D printing materials are growing quickly. Polymers, have a little bit less than doubled over the last 3 years, and $3 billion in revenue is not nothing. The vast majority of that is very likely powders because they're the ones that generate a lot of revenue compared to things like filament, though filament is certainly in there, but it's very segmented. Within this article, they really wanted to discuss how quickly metal is growing compared to polymer. Polymer grew at 20%, metal grew at 30%. Folks alluded to the fact that that's an indication of the polymer market maturing and starting to kind of slow down compared to metal, which is in kind of a rapid adoption phase. I disagree. Sure, metal is earlier in the hype cycle than polymers have been, but 20% compounded annual growth is still very, very good and almost double what you would expect from a semi-mature but still early market. Those generally fall down around 10 to 15%. To be in 20, you're still early stages, people growing and adopting very quickly in that, because 20% is a fantastic growth rate. Fantastic growth rate. There are tech companies that aspire to get to 20% growth rate. So, but no, it's cool to see that it is still growing. Of those years between 2021 to 2024, darn it. It doesn't include 2020. I'd love to know. I have not checked the demand graphs all the way back to COVID. I'm not sure if we're consuming the same amount of material today as we did during peak COVID, or if that is still a spike that's higher than that, or if we went up and then have now exceeded it with all the new adoption of 3D printing. All right, Shapeways. Oh, Shapeways has apparently struck an agreement to sell its software assets, likely indicating a fundamental change to the company as we know it. This is per Fabaloo. Per Shapeways has entered into an asset purchase agreement connection with the sale of its software business to AutoDMS Inc., an entity wholly owned by Shapeways' Chief Executive Officer, Greg Kress, and the executive of Shapeways' software business unit, Greg Rothman. As previously disclosed, the company has been working with advisors while considering strategic alternatives and is actively taking steps to sell a material portion of the company's assets. In the course of market checks conducted by the company's advisors and preliminary discussions with potential purchasers, the company has received indications of interest to acquire either its manufacturing business or software business, but not both together. Shapeways was at one time the leader of the industry with its first operations to offer 3D print services to the public. We can go into the color a little bit long. Shapeways went public, entering the stock market in 2021. They raised a huge amount of money by doing so, and soon after the company's valuation reached $564 million. Per about a week ago, Shapeways stock was worth $8 million. It's rough. As far as the valuation of Shapeways, we've talked about that before. Shapeways is probably a little bit pretty decently undervalued right now because they just have more machinery than what their current valuation is. That being said, they are still losing money every quarter, and I think they only have about 3 quarters worth of cash left. So they're on tail end if they didn't raise additional funding. And they hit penny stock a year ago, which is a big old hit, all the things. So Shapeways has been in a weird spot. This move to sell the software assets into one place and keep the manufacturing in another place, there's 2 things that this can kind of mean. Number one, it's a way of splitting these 2 business units so that one guy can buy that over there and one guy can buy that over there. I would presume that is what is going down. However, another version of this is, since the other company is wholly owned by the CEO, it could mean that the CEO is going to sell off the manufacturing stuff and continue to run the software company. And the software company effectively is separated from any sort of Chapter 11 proceedings that come along, if that happens to be necessary. So there's kind of 2 ways this goes down. Shapeways is very clearly not in a great spot. They're certainly not pushing at things. They were. But they've lost their step somewhere along the line and are clearly taking moves to try to revamp themselves a little bit or look for acquisition. Well, they're definitely looking for acquisition. That's their statement. But they can't get the thing sold off as is. Shapeways is really similar to Slant 3D in what we did. They were the first ones to do, print on demand for people. They always used powder systems since 2012 or so. So they're an old company, especially compared to us. But I see their problem in a competitive standpoint as this just being way too expensive. They were printing consumer items on demand, but a widget cost $20 or $30 and took 3 weeks to get there. It just was not what people were looking for. That's part of the reason that we focus on a warehouse where the shelves make the product. How do we, as quickly and reliably as possible, get a product made and out the door so that people didn't know it didn't exist before they ordered it. Shapeways, I'm not sure has hit that, except maybe on the engineering side where they have MJF and that kind of thing, to where they're knocking out parts and getting the cadence up. I also do not know what their lead times have been recently. The last time I was checking in on them was a couple of years ago. So, yeah, that info is certainly out of date. Okay, but that is the news. Okay, Tangled updates. So as I said, we released the $15 filament on the channel a week ago. Great response from all of you guys. Thank you so much. But it was more than what we thought it was. So we are working to get caught up. So a few orders are shipping a little bit late. But I do also want to thank you all who gave us reviews. The reviews have been glowing, and I'm very happy about that we got all of our acts together and that kind of thing. One review, actually we'll probably post it on the blog or something there. Folks were asking why our stuff was printing so cleanly. And it's mainly because we're making black with virgin material. Very few other companies do that. Most other companies make their black PLA with regrind, which is all the waste filament on the ground that's out of spec or something gets chopped back up and then run back through the extruder. And you run black and pink and purple and all these other things together, and then you throw in a bunch of black, and the black overpowers everything else. So you get to recycle your material. We're using virgin beads going right into black, which is not very common. But what it does is that, number one, you have higher melt temperatures because the thermal memory of the material, each time you print or each time you melt a thermoplastic and turn it back into a solid, the next time you melt it, it melts at a lower temp, and then a lower temp and a lower temp. And eventually, it effectively becomes easier and easier to melt the more times you melt it. So with our stuff, since we're only running it through the process once and it's not regrind, it's only ever melted once. So when it gets to you, it is more durable, more reliable, and just better quality stuff. We also, the tolerances advertised on the site, at least when we launched it, were 0.05. Right now, we've been consistently hitting about 0.02 tolerance on that throughout. So everything has improved. And that's part of the reason that we were able to do that $15 price reduction. We saw that trend line coming down. So we're like, we can push this. So that's going well. We'll continue to do that. We are exploring additional colors for Tangled. Don't know which ones it's going to be yet, but we will we'll keep you posted. But yes, the black Tangled filament is over there. We're almost caught up. There's only about a 1, maybe 2 day shipment delay on certain orders. So yeah, normally our fulfillment time is somewhere between 1 and 4 days, depending on how much inventory we have and the spikes in demand. Because again, to keep the pricing low, guys, we have to be responsive for it. If we're holding inventory, then that becomes an additional cost that then gets passed on to you. If we don't have that and we're reactive to the demand, we're able to keep those costs lower. But that's also kind of the reason for like the membership. The membership allows us to anticipate how much demand there is and then go from there. And here, as we crank along, we'll figure out what the steady state is and be able to respond to that more quickly and efficiently. And just make sure that we always have the standing material for what average demand is over time. Because we keep on having these spikes. Every time we do a price cut, there's a new spike and we don't know how high it goes. We knew that $15 was kind of a magic number, but yeah. Okay. In addition to that, question for the audience. 10kg Spools. It came up. It came up from a few requests. We never thought we would. I'm personally not a big fan of the 10kg spools, especially right now while we were early and refining the production process. But right now, everything is rolling well enough to where I think we might. We have a bunch of 10kg spools laying around that we have stored for use or return to our supplier, like a lot of them. So we may introduce it and just kind of market test it. We haven't done the math on it yet, but it's like, this is feasible. Like we got all the parts and pieces and there's no reason that it should be worse. And they're simple enough to where we might be able to do it for a discount from what we normally do. Maybe. We're trying to get everything universalized down to the $15 per kg, regardless of format, just because it's easier. We could nickel and dime you and be like, oh, that one's $14.50 and that one's $15.50 or whatever else it was. Or we could average it out and just say $15 for everything. And then whatever format you want, $15. And if you order a format that's efficient, then by golly, we got you for a little bit. And if you order a format that's less efficient, then you got us for a little bit. And it just evens out. Because doing so much price variation just makes people have to do math that isn't necessary. So yeah, but anyway, tensile testing. Yes, we literally just yesterday had our tensile testing machine delivered after a couple weeks sitting in the dock, a couple weeks on the boat, and all the rest of it. We got it now. So the tensile testing machine is in. We may be getting it set up as early as this weekend, and then be able to start releasing new videos over on Tangled testing for that machine. We're going to be doing a decent amount of prep because we want to jig it up and make sure that it's just very, very seamless and quick and easy to get stuff moved through it and the tests done that we want to get done. That will ensure that both our testing is consistent over time. There'll still be evolution here at the beginning, but we want to get that as formalized and simplified as possible. And then Tangled testing and Slant 3D will kind of collaborate on a number of different videos in order to create a nice kind of back and forth where a concept is introduced inside of a Slant 3D video, but then the Tangled testing video dives into that. It says, oh, here's the data that substantiates that thing that we said in Slant 3D. But that allows us to say, hey, here's the thing that happens. And then if you really want to be like, actually with us, then you can go over to Tangled testing and see that. So there'll be a nice symbiosis there. Tangled testing will also be not just testing our filament, but it will be testing everybody's filament, because the point of it is getting a source of qualification for all the materials and all the colors combined against each other. The way it's going to go down is in the first probably a couple months of videos of those. It's going to be kind of dry because we're going to be like, we tested the black, we tested the white, and so on and so forth. And we're going to be doing it for individual manufacturers. But then once we have all those guys aggregated, then we can start comparing and cross-comparing. And like every color of white PLA reviewed, and you can see the final results of how they behaved. So that'll be very useful. And of course, we'll continue to test various print settings and design kind of things. And a video like that will probably be coming out here in a couple of weeks. Nifty design video for the main channel, actually. I think you guys will really like it. But there's that. Etsy update. So a number of updates were pushed to the Etsy plugin this week. We finally were able to implement individual SKU matching. So the individual SKU matching, how do I want to go into this? Before, you were able to create a listing for a single product with a single color, and then you'd match it to a file inside of the Etsy plugin. We understood that this was limiting. But number one, the vast majority of variations are never used. And the vast majority of products sold on Etsy are gray, white, or black. So for a minimum viable product, that was the thing we focused on. And for Etsy as it operated, Etsy has weirdness in it that just made SKU matching a lot harder than we wanted to have to deal with. But we finally figured that all out. So now you can create a listing with 3, 5, 10 different SKUs, and then you can match each one of those SKUs to a different file and to a different color. So you can have small, medium, large, gray, white, black, all the things. Each one of them has to have its own SKU, though. You can't do variations inside of Etsy itself, where Etsy's like, oh yeah, enter in black and so on and so forth. You have to give them separate SKU names. This is very important. You have to give them separate SKU names. But it should allow you to create a lot more variation. And as far as catalog, we are updating the catalog. New designers are going to start being posted there here in a couple days. And the catalog is going to continue to expand. So I recommend getting in there on that. The way catalog is going to grow, it's very possible that catalog access will start getting more expensive into the future. So I recommend getting a hold of it just as soon as you can, because we're going to add more designs to it and prints that you can then put into your Etsy store and pad out the inventory. So it's a good way to do that. All right. Discussion topics. Beef with Scott Galloway. If you know Scott Galloway, he's a professor, podcaster, business person, whatever you want to call him, influencer. I do recommend him. If you haven't watched him, I do recommend watching Scott Galloway. He's a good reference for some of this stuff. But he recently did one of his annual prediction presentations where he talked about AI and obesity drugs and all the rest of it. In that talk, which I can't remember which one it was. Normally he does it at South by Southwest, but this one was done someplace else. It was 2024 predictions, Scott Galloway. Look for him. But in this presentation, he was going through all the stuff and he was harping on VR. And he's going, and he doesn't like VR, and I get it. But he was like, these stupid, I can't remember the phrase he uses for it, but he was saying VR is as stupid. He made all the disses up against VR, and then he went by and he dropped this little nugget and said, VR is as stupid as 3D printing. And that stung a little bit, but I also wondered, where did that come from? And I was like, what is the analogy that he is looking at? And most certainly, in the context of hype versus reality, 3D printing is as bad as VR. VR is super hyped, tons of money put into it, has made no money at all. 3D printing in a similar spot, though some of us in the industry would be like, it's turn and a corner, high-speed stuff solved everything. But I still fully agree that consumer 3D printing is a nice little thing, but it's not the next big thing. It's not a printer in every home type of a technology and never will be. I agree with that. I don't know how he looks at it from a manufacturing context, which is what we do. I know that he knows nothing about manufacturing outside of the context of trade schools and the relationships with college and that kind of thing, which he's interested in. But 3D printing being as stupid as VR, it's kind of true, because personal 3D printing is as stupid as VR. You can keep on having new releases and better products and that kind of thing, but you would never have iPhone level adoption of 3D printing or personal computer level adoption of 3D printing. It will never occur. You don't have iPhone adoption of paper printing ever. There were not that many printers around because they were not reliable pieces of machinery. And a 3D printer itself is not a reliable piece of machinery, consumer or otherwise. I don't care what Bamboo Labs has done. Their machines are going to break because physics. That makes them a very bad appliance. And because there is not a cohesive ecosystem for any of these things yet, there's nothing valuable to them. It's like buying a VR headset and then wandering through the 2 apps that work. You can play it for only so long before it really loses its charm, regardless of what the price of the headset is. And this is, the same problem VR has had. And 3D printing, has the same thing. You can only print like 12 things before you're like, oh, that's great. I'm just going to go buy the thing I actually need on Amazon. This is why we focus on back-end operations. This is why we have our API and the Etsy plugin, so that when somebody goes to Amazon and is looking for the solution for that specific problem, 3D printing is leveraged to produce that solution, but it's not required to be inside the house in order to get it. We're opening up access to printed parts so that you can get the variation and the selection and all the rest of it. But you don't have to deal with the hassle of how to operate a 3D printer and find files and learn anything. You You go to Amazon, you order your new little iPhone stand, and that iPhone stand is 3D printed and then delivered. So all that kind of stuff. I get why he thinks it's dumb, because he very likely knows 3D printing is a consumer technology. And guys, it's a hobby tool. It's a hobby tool. It is not a consumer product. And again, doesn't change with anything that has happened in the last couple of years technologically. That does not put it over the edge at all. Because number one, it's not that much faster. Number two, it's not that much easier. It's easier to everybody who's been leveling their own bed and calibrating their own machines. But to the normal human, printing is still intimidating and hard. And underwhelming after you've used it a few times. So anyhow. Other discussion topic, the supplier that dropped us. We're going to save that one for a little bit later. We'll save that till next podcast. So tune in then. But beyond that, thank you guys for watching. Comment down below any sort of videos that you want us to have us make. The Design For videos, we keep on keeping those in the can. And other types of stop snapping your snaps, those types of videos are still coming down as often as we can get a hold of them and find the good ones. But yeah, comment any other ideas that you might have. And per usual, have a great day, everybody.